I love it. He talks about being in the presence of the Lord and healings taking place and families restored. How many tonight can honestly say you feel a yearning in your spirit, you just want more? And that's the way God works. The more He takes out of us, He makes room for more of Him. So that's that's how we get closer to God. The less room there is for the world, then we become closer to God. We desire more from Him. We find ourselves wanting more. You ultimately find yourself spending more time in prayer, more time in worship, just getting close to God, because there's a void now, and that void will only be filled by God. Okay, so that's what this class does. It helps you to see the hurt and allows God to heal it. Okay, so we're going to go into lesson number 4 and possibly 5 and 6, just because they're very short, and they're just short lessons. And so we went through lesson number 1 that talked about the wounding, and that really sums into this. We have to find the hurt in order for us to realize it's there, okay? And all lesson number 1 was to help you find the hurt and allow God to heal it. How many knows that sometimes we just go through life with pain and baggage from our childhood, or even in utero wounding, and we don't really know it, and we know something's wrong, we just don't know what's wrong, and we don't know how to fix it. And lesson 1 helped us to get there. It helped us identify the problem and open it up so that God could heal it. Lesson number 2 talked about our earthly fathers, and that the Bible actually talks more about fathers than it does mothers. It talks more about fathering than it does mothering. And I'm telling you, when I first started teaching this class, I thought, that can't be, because I always put the emphasis on the mom and not the dad. Dad's job was just to go out and earn the living, and that was it. And we found out in this lesson that no, actually, it's his job to bring nurturing. It's his job to bring a whole lot more to the table. So we learned that in lesson 2. Lesson 3 talked about the moms and their role as a mother, and their spiritual role with the child, with the baby. And when it lacks any of that we learned in lesson 3, then that can create trauma, and with trauma equals hurt, okay? So it helped us to spot that. So we're in lesson 4 now, and I told you last week that last week was going to be heavier. Lessons 1 and 2 and 3 basically were an introduction to it. Lesson 3, though, was a little heavy. You guys could testify to that. Stirred up some stuff. And I told you at lesson 3 it's going to get a little tougher, okay, as we go. So tonight will be no different as we go into abusive wounding, okay? And I know in your mind you think, everybody knows abusive wounding. Everybody knows that. But I think when we get through here, you might recognize wounding a little different than you did before, okay? So we're going to jump right in. Your scripture verse is Colossians 3:21 and Ephesians 6:4. Colossians just breaks Ephesians 6:4 down in a amplified version. Gives you two books of the Bible to reference through. So let's jump right in. She says this. She says, in these lessons on wounding, we want to look back at our childhood and at the same time look at how our own children should be raised. We want to see where we may have been wounded, because that area holds the potential for us to wound someone else. Let me just stop right here for a second. Even your own children, okay? What we've learned through statistics and everything, when you're wounded as a child and that wound goes unnoticed or unmet, you have the potential of doing the same thing to your children, hurting your child just like you were hurt, and it's all subliminally. I want to make sure you understand, I'm not sitting here saying that you set out, Dana, to hurt your children, because we all know that that's not true, okay? But if we don't know any better, remember what I said, whenever you got pregnant with your child, you were never given a handbook promise that said, okay, here's how you're to raise this child. Here's how to nurture this child. Here's how to do everything that you're supposed to do so this child is right. we even talked about with a driver's license, you at least have to take a test, okay? But mothering, you just go to the hospital, have your baby, and you're expected to know how to mother when you go home with that child. And it's just simply not true. So what we found out was that we do what our moms did because that's what we know. And that's how generational curses come about. That's how we end up hurting our child and not even realize it because we simply do what mom did, okay? And if some of you are thinking right now, think about it. There were things, and we're going to learn in lesson 5 and 6 about judgments and things like that. There were things that I, as a father, I swore I would never do to my children, what my parents did. And I thought that was a good thing. And you'll find out in 5 and 6 that I can't judge my parents, okay? I don't sit in the seat of judgment. And I mean, honestly, I said to somebody one time when I was about to get married, I said, I just don't want to do what my father did. And they said, what's that? I said, he was married 3 or 4 times. I don't want to be married 3 or 4 times. I want to do this thing one time, and that's it. And I thought that was a good statement. And I learned later on in life that who am I to judge my father and his divorces? I don't know why he got divorced, and there may have been good reason. I don't know. So you're going to learn in 5 and 6, sometimes we have to be careful. But in this, we have to be careful. If you know you've been wounded as a child, you want to be very careful not to carry that same wound into your child's life, okay? So watch this. It says, we come into this world as infants with our spirits vulnerable and open. If you have little children right now, think about that, okay? Their little spirits are vulnerable and they're open because that's the way it's supposed to be, okay? Our spirits are fragile and can bruise as easily as a gardenia touched by human breath. Now, I don't know if any of y'all are flower people, but a gardenia is a very fragile flower. If you touch the petals of a gardenia, the oils on your hand will cause it to turn brown where you touched it. Or in the process of smelling it, if you breathe on a gardenia, your breath actually turns the gardenia brown. It's very, very fragile. And that's why she references this. Some people got, no, I'm just kidding. just kidding. But she's referencing the gardenia because she wants you to realize that's how fragile your child is. That's how fragile your baby is, okay? And she wants you to realize, be very careful with your children, okay? So she goes on and she says, as we experience abuse, yelling, neglect, etc., our spirits begin to close and our little hearts begin to harden. Abuse hurts physically, spiritually, and mentally. The scars are not just physical. Abuse also scars the souls of those that are abused, okay? Most of us have experienced some kind of abuse because for many years, parents were more or less responsible only to God for their behavior. Think about this now. When you were a child, you never heard of DCF. You never heard of Children and Family Services. You never were threatened that if your child is abused that we're going to call the authorities. You know, your parents basically could do whatever they wanted to do because there was no regulation. Okay, the only standards they were held to was God. Okay, so that's why a lot of this generation that I'm speaking to today is wounded and hurt, okay? So watch this. It says this. Everyone did what was right in his or her own sight, and we just assumed that our family was normal. Let me tell you a little story. One time, I think I told you all this, but one time my daughter Courtney wanted to have a sleepover. And I said, you can have your sleepover, but I need you to understand the rules of our house are still in place. So if you want to come in here and act a fool with your friend here, I'm going to hold you to those standards still. She said, okay, no problem. So the friend comes over and they're having a good time. Well, Courtney, I don't know what she did, but I had to bring her into where I was and scold her. And she goes back in the room and she says to her little friend, I'm so sorry, my dad did that, and she said, I wish my dad would do that. The little girl did. And Courtney said, what? She said, I wish my dad would scold me. Sometimes I do things on purpose just so that I could get his attention. You see? So in Courtney's world, that was just normal, okay? But in the little girl's world, it wasn't. And she wished that her dad would give her, you got to remember, negative attention is still attention, okay? So her dad was a workaholic. He just worked all the time, and she never got his attention. So she would act out and do ugly things to get dad's attention. But he didn't even do that, see? So, so she thought, Courtney, it was just normal, but to this little girl, it was abnormal, okay? And she wished that her dad would do those things. So to voice our pain or our emotions as a child was completely unacceptable and would often bring about more abuse. Can anybody relate? The feeling of helplessness and powerlessness over the adults in our life may have left a well of rage within the inner child. Does everybody understand that? So if you were yelled at, or if your parents did anything other than what we're talking about tonight, yelling, hollering, screaming, slapping, hitting, punching, hurting, your child does not feel they can open up and say anything about it, so they just hold it in on the inside. Or maybe you held it in on the inside, wishing you could say something, wishing you could say whatever it was you were feeling, but you couldn't, so you held it in. Only to grow, only to fester, only to get worse. And you are finding now later on in life that a life moment comes along and triggers that emotion that you suppressed, and it comes out as an adult now, okay? But these are all coming and stemming from what you suppressed as a child, okay? Remember what I taught you before. When we suppress something, it's because it hurts so bad we don't ever want to feel it again, so we push it way down. And that's our intention, is to never feel it again. But then all of a sudden, a life moment comes along, triggers that emotion, and you go back to the same age you were when the wound took place. Okay? And now you're an adult acting like a 12-year-old in your emotions, feelings, everything, you see. And the people around you are going, what the heck's wrong? Whoa, what the heck? And you're reliving a moment in your life that was real, that was serious, that hurt, that was just the worst thing in the world to you, okay? So that's why, as a Christian and as you sitting in this class, when you see somebody acting differently than you would, it's best, rather than to judge them, it's best to sit back and just say, God, help them. Because we don't know what they're going through. We don't know what they're trying to process. We don't know what's happening. And to do anything less than to ask God to heal them would be wrong, okay? Because we just don't know. I never will forget this woman, this girl I used to work with. I mean, I just didn't understand, because she just acted like a child all the time. Just would do childish things, say childish things, and it was all just to get attention, okay? And finally one day the boss just lost it and said, I don't understand you. Why? You're 25 years old. Why do you act like this? And the girl just busted down crying, and she said, if you went through what I went through in my childhood, you'd probably act like this too. And the guy stopped in his tracks. He didn't know what to say, and it just meant the world to me. And I realized then she was hurt. She was abused. She was traumatized as a child. And God love her, she's just trying to process the pain. She's trying to get through life and don't know how, you see. So always remember, people don't wake up in the morning and decide, I'm just going to be ugly today. I'm just going to go out into the world and be ugly today. There's a reason behind it. So our thing is to not judge and to ask God to heal the hurt, okay? So I like this. She says, because of we weren't able to voice our pain or what we was thinking or what we was feeling, we often hold it in, so because we know it would just bring about more abuse. And the feeling was a feeling of helplessness and powerlessness from the adult. So how many can remember as a child feeling that way? The situation, you become helpless, you have no power, you have no authority. It's best not to say anything, or the abuse gets worse. Okay, let me give you an example. What, you just backtalk me? Come here to me. You see? And smack you again. You want something? You want to cry? Come here, I'll give you something to cry about. And you tear the butt up again. All you're doing is adding hurt to another hurt. You see? You see what I'm saying? And what you don't realize is that child is now traumatized. There's trauma there. And here's the thing. If it's not dealt with, it will only grow. The enemy will magnify that trauma, and it will be a crack in that child's armor, and that child will begin, that the devil just begins to just fertilize it. And it just grows and grows and grows, okay? So, let me see here. Okay, now watch this. She says, the feeling of helplessness and powerlessness over the adults in our life may have left a well of rage. Anybody ever gotten so upset and angry and helpless that it came out in the form of rage? It came out in just an explosive behavioral, even though it was wrong, you were just letting it out, okay? And probably maybe even your parent was back, whoa, what the heck, okay? Even though they still got in trouble, but the parent was seriously like, whoa, where'd that come from? They don't act like that. But because the parent don't know any better, see what we should do is go, whoa, whoa, whoa. That pain's enormous. That trauma is enormous, but we don't, because we don't want it to spotlight what we did wrong, so we suppress it, see, and the child goes on with that hurt and pain, okay? So the childhood rage will oftentimes seep out into our lives as adults, spilling over into every relationship. Do you get it? Every relationship, from one failed relationship to another, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a friendship, no matter what it is, it's just spilling over and over and over, and you can't get along with anyone. You can't get, nothing happens because you haven't healed on the inside, okay? So, and to be real honest with you, at this point, you don't even know what's wrong. You just know you had a crappy childhood and it wasn't any good, and I don't like to talk about it, but you don't understand what's wrong with me. What's happening with me? Why do I have these meltdowns? Why do I just go off screaming at people when they didn't, when you really sit down and with rationale and you go, oh, wow, the situation really wasn't that bad. Why did I react in such a way? You see what I mean? I know none of y'all have ever done that. I have. I've actually, Carly, sat back and say, why did I lose it like that? I mean, it wasn't really that bad, okay? But that's because that should have been a red flag to me, that there's something left in there that's been undealt with, okay? See? But who knows that? Who would know that? Who would know that? Oh, wow, I just had a fit. Oh, it's because of me. I have trauma on the inside. Said no one. Okay. It is very important to have a proper understanding of discipline and punishment so that we may deal with our own children consistently and appropriately. All right? Now let's look at Ephesians 6, verse 4. Fathers, do not irritate and provoke your children to anger. Do not exasperate them to resentment, but rear them tenderly in the training, discipline, counsel, and admonition of the Lord. Now let's look at Colossians. This is an amplified version. Fathers, do not provoke or irritate or fret your children. Do not be hard on them or harass them, lest they become discouraged and sullen and morose and feel inferior and frustrated. In other words, do not break their little spirits. Okay? Now, the Bible also says if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. If you break that down in Hebrew, it says if you spare the rod, you hate the child. So, discipline is not a bad thing, but it has to be appropriately applied, okay? And probably as a child, yours wasn't, okay? Because there was no regulation back then. You got the mess beat out of you, and it was supposed to be okay, all right? Or I did. I don't really know about you. Most parents do not realize that what they do is considered violence or abuse. So I want to outline what is considered abusive behavior. Hitting, strapping, that's hitting with a belt, hair pulling, slapping, burning, yelling, choking, shaking, kicking, throwing, pushing, beating, punching, scolding, biting, pinching, fits of rage, and cursing. Say again? Say what? You knocked them all out except for two of them? Oh, okay. So, some of these you can relate to, and some of them you're probably sitting there going, what? Like burning. You think, who would burn their child? But as a counselor, Pastor Teresa and I can tell you, we've heard many stories where a parent has taken a cigarette because their child did something wrong and stuck it to them. Or the child was told, do not mess with the stove. Do not mess with the stove. So in reaction to the child going and messing with the stove again, they burn the child to show the child the stove will burn you. Okay? So that's not out of place. That actually happens in families. Okay? Now, you say, I can't even fathom that. But watch this. We talked earlier about generational curses. Okay? If a parent is abusive, let me back up. If your parent was abusive to you, then you have the character already within you to be abusive to your children. My dad, his dad put him over a sack of corn and beat the mess out of him with a belt until he just couldn't hardly walk. And he did the same thing to us. He thought that's what you were supposed to do. So he didn't put us over a sack of corn, but he just whipped us with a belt running in circles until the next day we couldn't hardly sit down. Our legs was just tore up, And so I know that some of us in this room we don't get some of this, but let's go to some of the lighter ones. Yelling at your child. Cussing at your child. Well, I would hope you're not pinching or biting your child. But let's put this in proper perspective. You got a child that's a biter. In the old day, if you want to stop your child from biting, you bite them back. Okay? You just say, come here, you come here. How did that feel? That's how your brother felt. Well, now watch this. That child only knows that the person I love the most, that my heart goes out to the most, just bit me on the arm. So you just broke that little child's spirit, okay? I don't care how you explain it. Now, mama's fixing to bite you because you've got to stop biting your brother. They don't understand that. They're 1 year old, they're 2 year old. It might have stopped them, Tina, but the spirit was broken. The spirit was wounded, okay? I can't with her. Yeah. Right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Absolutely. But watch this. You're looking at things like choking, shaking. These all sound like they're so far-fetched. But watch this. If the parent is still going into fits of rage, it might result in a shaking of a child. Like, do you hear me right now? Or even some parents just losing it and grabbing them by the throat, You ever say that to me again and I'll rip your throat out. You see, these are things that happens, okay? But these are all forms of abusive behavior, okay? So here's question number 1. Before reading any further, list any abusive behavior that you have experienced in your childhood. See it? I'm with you, brother. I'm with you. I know, but I'm telling you, it's They didn't know any better. Let's just leave it at that. They didn't know any better. I have done that a time or two myself. So let's look at the top of page 23. Nope. If your parents exhibited any of the abusive behavior listed, then you experienced physical abuse in your family of origin. If you do any of these things to your children, your pets, your spouse, then you're abusive. Then you're abusive. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you present this behavior, you need to own the fact that you're abusive. And I'm not judging you. I'm just telling you these are the standards. And the bottom line is we repent and we move on, okay? And we ask God to deliver us and heal us. So let's look at some more types of abuse. It says here there are many types of abuse, and here's some of the examples. Number one, abusive discipline, verbal abuse, spiritual abuse, emotional abuse, being forced to choose between parents, sexual abuse, and neglect. Now, let's break those down. Abusive discipline, let's look at this. If a child is spanked hard enough to leave a bruise, a scratch, or a welt, if he is kicked or slapped or shaken or jerked, it's abuse. Did you live in a home where someone broke dishes or windows, maybe punched walls, destroyed furniture, threw objects when they were angry? This is also abusive, okay? Threatening someone by waving a gun or a knife while angry is abusive. Adults often forget how fragile the human spirit is, especially in the little child. They forget how much the child depends upon the parent for affirmation. Oftentimes, we expect infants to act like adults, not realizing that a baby must be free to explore and learn about his or her surroundings. We often place far more on his little shoulders than he is capable of understanding. Interesting objects on a table within a baby's reach catch his eye, and he wants to touch it. Mother, slapping his hands over and over, comes nearer to breaking his spirit than training him to respect the property of others. It instills in his little spirit that things are more important than people. First, remove the objects. Then allow your child to explore. As he gets older and is able to comprehend your instructions, you can replace the non-breakable items, and one at a time, teaching him that certain things are only to be looked at. Exploring and touching are natural infant experiences, and it is much easier on parents and child to allow this to happen naturally. Now, I don't know about you, but I hated going to my grandmother's on my dad's side because we weren't allowed to touch anything. She had all these little whatnots everywhere, and they were so cute and pretty, but we weren't allowed to touch them. It was just, and our hand would get smacked. You know, don't touch that. Don't touch that. Oh, dear God, what can we touch? I want to go outside. Would you open the door so I don't touch the handle on the door? We didn't know what to touch. But how many of you have experienced that? You know, being told, don't touch that, don't touch that, don't touch that. Did you ever think at once you got your hand smacked that it was breaking your spirit? See, you don't know. People don't teach this stuff. But the bottom line is a child thinks, just like we read, that, oh my God, objects are more important than I am. It's natural for me as a baby to go and explore, and I'm being abused, I'm being slapped on in the hand, I'm being told I can't touch nothing. And see, so I'm just giving you examples as how that door gets opened, okay? And it can go as far back as you being a toddler trying to go around a little end table and you're touching the pretty things on the end table when I guess you're not supposed to. You know, so we smack their hand, and we think we're doing right because Mom smacked our hand when we tried to do that, you see. But we're being taught now that that's abusive behavior, okay? So, the question is, how do you feel when someone breaks something of yours whether it's valuable or not. How does that make you feel? Gets you mad, don't it? All right, let's look at verbal abuse. Many parents verbally abuse. Some scream or yell the abuse while others speak in their regular tone of voice, but either way, the words you say crush the child's spirit. Words that demean or devalue a child's worth are abusive. Cursing is always abusive, and these are examples. Anybody in here ever called your child stupid? I mean, we're not going to judge you. Maybe it just came out. What, are you stupid? I mean, did you really just do that? Are you stupid? You see, and you didn't think nothing about it because you were called stupid when you were a child. Your parent didn't mean you were stupid, but they just asked you, But what they don't realize is that it's wounding your little spirit. Okay, good for nothing. Anybody relate to that? Sorry, little blankety blank 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 blank. Just cuss you after they call you sorry and tell you how sorry you are. You idiot. Dummy. See, these are word curses. These are word curses that you're speaking over your own child, okay? If your child brought home a bad report card, Dana, and you said, what, are you stupid or something? You just word cursed your own child, and you actually spoke a dumb spirit over your child, okay? So we want to be real careful about what we say and how we say it, and just think about the child's emotions and feelings and how is this going to affect them, okay? Because I don't know about you, but I wasn't a really good child. And if my parents said don't, I usually did because I usually did the opposite of what they said. So, no, you got that from your mom. That was. But here's the bottom line. I was going to challenge them because of the way it was presented to me. If they would have sat me down and said, let's talk about this, okay? I mean, what you just did is really not cool, and we shouldn't do that again, okay? But when you look at me and you call me names that I know I'm not, and you say ugly things to me that I know shouldn't be said, I didn't look at it as breaking my spirit. I looked at it as I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you, okay? You think I'm dumb? You think I'm stupid? I'm going to show you, okay? And that was just as wrong as what they called me, okay? Again, nobody taught this stuff back then, so you just did what your parents did, okay? My dad would cuss us up one side and down the other, okay? And my mom, if he didn't get it all, she followed right in behind him, told the rest. So before my BC days, I probably did the same thing. I probably cussed them out too, and maybe called them stupid and dumb. Here I go, get you up and get you to school. What, you just act so stupid. You bring this report card home, what's wrong with you, I don't know that happened, but I assumed it did, okay, because I was human just like everybody else. But that's all abusive, verbal abuse, okay? So what's this? If you became angry and resentful, then it is most likely that this was instilled in your spirit as a child. The wounding of the inner child should be prayed for. Okay? Constant criticism can break the child's spirit as much as physical abuse can. Okay? Children are empty buckets looking to their parents to fill them. Name calling is abusive. Making fun of a child is abusive. Embarrassing a child on purpose is abusive. Can you remember being called names as a child? Can you remember being made fun of or even embarrassed by your family as a child? These things happen. Well, you don't realize that there's trauma there. There's a wound there, okay? You were wounded no matter what age it was, and if that wound was never dealt with, it's still growing, okay? So you're adult now, you get into your relationship, and all of a sudden this man or this woman looks at you out of anger one day and says, what, are you stupid? And all of a sudden, he don't understand why you blacked both his eyes. Because You went into a fit of rage because he just uncovered something from your childhood that's still there and it's still hurting. And after it's all over, he says, man, I didn't really mean it. He don't have a clue that he just touched a nerve. He doesn't have a clue that he just uncovered a wound that you've been suppressing for years now. See? Exactly. See? So that's why it's important as God brings these things up that you deal with them. Okay? That's why this class is designed so when you feel these things coming up, we stop the class and deal with it right then. Okay? Mm-hmm.
This is making so much sense in my head.
Well, good. It's supposed to.
Listen, I was this type of person used to before Christ saved, before I got saved. Somebody say something like, okay, one example. I was working at Mushroom St. And this girl was acting me and her was friends. And then something happened, and then she came and approached me. But anyway, I ended up beating her so bad. But I was that type of person. I didn't stop beating her till it's like I wanted to smell blood or see blood.
Okay.
So I know I was strong.
But that's rage. That's a spirit of rage that takes over.
With stitching cords, all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
cords and all
Right.
kinds.
Right. Yeah.
And I did it to my child, so yeah.
Sure. Sure. I don't think there's anyone in this room that didn't get whipped with something.
Yeah.
You know, whether it was a flip flop, whether it was a belt, whether it was whatever. Whatever my mom could reach and get her hands on, boom, that's what you got smacked with. You know, and but see, that's what they did back then, and that's why the generation that they're doing it to is wounded. They're a wounded generation. Okay, and then what do? We turn around and do the same thing to our child. See, if your mom whipped you with a belt, I guarantee you spanked with a belt. If your mom took her shoe off and whipped you with her shoe, I guarantee you there's been a time you've taken your shoe off and whipped your child with your shoe. We do what we know. We do what we've seen. We say what we've heard. And that's what I'm trying to get into you right now. If you're still doing it, it has to stop, okay? Because I don't care how old your children are, they still have wounds. And that wound is still there. And all you're doing is taking the cap off. Okay, and no matter how deep they suppress it, it's still going to come out. Okay, and you're going to see it as a parent come out in the form of rage. When things happen and you look at your child and go, who are you? Where is this coming from? Well, now you know. Okay, yes, sir.
So, in those situations, a lot of times they can be abused. But the Bible also says spare the rod, spoil the child.
Exactly. Yes.
Like that, or like doing it out of anger? Like, where's the line to where it gets
Well, if you were talking, if I was a DCF agent, they would tell you that appropriate discipline is to spank your child on the bottom, okay, with your hand, not with an object and not with anything else. I've counseled families that DCF was called on. When the DCF agent gets there, they said, well, all I did was I spanked my child. The first question is, where did you spank them? I spanked them on their bottom. What did you spank them with? I spanked them with my hand. And the person even said, the person said, show me how hard you hit them, okay? And she said, I did like this, okay? And the DCF person said, that's not abuse, okay? So the person calling in was contacted back and said, that's not abuse, that's discipline. You're allowed to discipline your child, okay? We talked about in an earlier class, if you're going to have a verbal altercation with your child, get down on their level and speak equally to them with kind words and soft words. And you can't, even though you get on their level, you still can't say, well, you stupid little idiot, you did this, and then smack them or whatever. Just because you're on their level, you still have to use wisdom, Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. True.
So
Mm-hmm.
when you, whoop your child on their bottom, is it when you leave marks? Is that considered abuse?
Yes.
Some kids, they're sensitive, so they're gonna.
This is true.
Turn red or whatever.
Yes.
But is it like bruises, or is it like webs, or is it?
I think the way it's defined is if the next day you can see a mark, whether it's a bruise, whether it's a whelp, whether it's just a red mark, DCF would classify that as abuse. Now, here's the thing. You're the parent. You have to use wisdom. If you know your child is that fragile, maybe you find another method of discipline rather than spanking, because DCF doesn't really want to hear an explanation when they see marks on the child. To them, it doesn't matter, okay, because all they hear is lies all day long anyway. So the bottom line is this child is bruised, or there's marks on the child, and that's the way it's going to be reported. There's marks on the child. If you know your child is very, very sensitive to that, I would probably find a timeout method or something, or something other than I mean, if you want to get to them nowadays, take their phone. I mean, you take the phone. Hey, you want to see rage? You want to see rage come out now, you take the phone, okay? It's a problem. But verbal, yes.
So if there is known trauma, I'll just speak for myself personally. If it was, I know there was trauma in my life. I know there's been a lot of suppressing. I know there's it's spilled over into my relationship with my daughter. How do I go about fixing it without rehashing it all over again? Like, is that something,
Right. Well, the first thing you're going to look for is red flags, okay? Red flags. I just said if your child is displaying their emotions out of a fit of rage, rather than you responding with that same equals, you have to step back and realize, whoa, what's wrong? Where is this coming from? Children are very smart, okay? And they will show you in every way they can. If they come very quiet, if they pull away from you, if they get rage with you, if they get angry with you, or they start saying things that they wouldn't normally say to you. If there's so many different ways a child will try their best to show you, I'm hurting, okay? The only thing you can do without going back and regurgitating all of this stuff is begin right then developing a new relationship with that child. Even if it means you sit them down and say, listen, I know mommy's hurt you over the past. And you don't even have to bring up anything. All you have to say is, mommy's not made good decisions. Mommy made some bad decisions, and that hurt you, and I know that. But I want you to know that I'm very sorry. And from this day forward, you're going to see a new mommy, and I'm going to do my very best. And you start building that new relationship with them, because I want you guys to understand, to a child, negative attention is still attention, okay? If you have multiple children and a child comes up to you or they tell someone else, mommy loves this child more than she loves me, that's a huge red flag. And you need to sit that child down and say, tell mommy why you don't feel loved. Tell mommy why you think I love sister more than I love you. Because that's not something you overlook, okay? You want to go and you want to find out where did this come from, okay? As a twin growing up, I always thought my dad loved my brother more than he did me. And I even told him that. I said, when I got old enough to work, I went into the medical field. My son went to work with my dad because he didn't mind getting his hands dirty. Well, I don't want to get my hands dirty. My dad said, the way my dad approached it, he says, what, are you queer? That's the word they used back then. I said, I'm not even going to dignify that with an answer. Well, you want to go in the hospital, you want to work in the hospital. Men don't work in the hospital. Men aren't nurses. Men aren't this. And I said, I'm not even going to answer that, okay? But you see, that's what his dad would have said to him, see? But to me, that stuck me right in the heart, man. I'm like, what? I walked off thinking, that ignorant rascal. You understand? See, I was just as bad as him, because the things I said after that comment were no different than what he said to me. You see? It's just, that works that way. Right. Right.
But then when Nola was born, she's only 1.5 now. They were like 4 and 5.
Right.
They just saw me, giving Nola love because she was
Right,
born.
right, right.
And they went through a period you love Nola more than you love us. And I was like, I don't, but you can go to the bathroom by yourself. You can
Right, right.
do stuff for yourself.
Yep.
Nola can't.
Right.
So I don't, maybe there's still some trauma from that.
Well, but that's normal child behavior, and the normal reaction to that is exactly what you said. You have to get down on their level and explain to them. No, I mean, Nola can't do things on her own right now, so mommy has to help her. And I did this for you when you was a baby too, and this is what we do. And you can even help mommy do this until Nola gets old enough to do it on her own. You see, because what they feel is real. I mean, that's a real feeling. Mommy loves Nola more than she does me, okay? Then the other child hears that, and they jump right on board too, you know? So all you can do is explain that, okay? And don't be surprised if you do have to discipline the child, it comes out again. You're only doing this because you love Nola more. Yeah, children are very wise when it comes to that, you know. But communication, as it is in adult life, is just as important in a child's life. You see, communication is the best thing, your best friend, okay? All right? So, naturally, name calling is always abusive, okay? If you don't want to be, you just, first of all, no name calling. A parent just needs to drop that out of their vocabulary when it comes to children. And you're like, but my mom did. I know, we know that. But we're trying to do better, okay? So you just can't. Now watch this. If you're not going to do this to your child, then you can't do it to your husband in front of your child, or husband to your wife in front of your child, because that totally confuses your child. Wait a minute. Mommy just said that we're not supposed to call each other names, but she just called daddy this, or daddy just called mommy this. You see, you're confusing the child, and the child is just doesn't want to say anything because they don't want to be in trouble, so they just don't say anything. But do you see how their little mind is confused? Because I'm not supposed to do this. I can't call my sister a dummy, but boy, what mom just called dad, you know, or dad just called mom. You see what I mean? So it's a full circle effect. We're changing everything, okay? All right? So let's look at spiritual abuse. All the religious ones in the house. Spiritual abuse, first of all, any questions on verbal abuse? Everybody understand verbal abuse pretty good. Okay. So spiritual abuse. Spiritual abuse is experienced in many religious homes and in many legalistic fellowships in the body of Christ in an effort to produce holiness or perfection in children. It involves telling the child that God is going to get them if they do this or that. When a child is told that God doesn't love bad children, or that God is angry with them because of what they did, it is abusing the child spiritually. Many times adults tell me that because of some failure in childhood, they were made to kneel on rice with their hands stretched toward heaven for a certain length of time as punishment. This is abusive. But see, now that's usually in other countries, but let me show you a form of abuse. The child says, Mommy, I don't want to go to church today. If you don't go to church, God's going to be angry with you. Or if you don't go to church, you're going to hell. See? You can't punish a child using God. Okay? You can't, now I'm not telling you can't make a child go to church, because you can. You're the parent, and if you're going to church, the child goes to church, okay? But then the child gets up into teenage years, and they maybe they don't want to go. Instead of saying, well, we're going because you're a bad child and you need church. Or I had to go when I was your age and you're going too. You know, you want to be real careful with that, and you need to sit down with them and say, tell me why you don't want to go. Why don't you want to go to church? I'm just really tired, Mom. It's not for any other reason, but today I'm just tired. Okay, but we're not going to make a habit of this, okay? But if you say to them things like what your parents probably said to you, you know, but because of going to church, it's spiritual abuse, okay? We can't threaten children with church, okay? And here, let me give you a very common one. You're a pastor, so by God, one of your children is going to be a pastor. One of them going to get up and preach the gospel, okay? And you're going to put it on all three of them until one of them says, okay, I'll do it, okay? That's spiritual abuse. You can't do that. I mean, if let God call them, okay? You just sit on the sidelines. And maybe God is not going to call them into the ministry of pastoring a church or even preaching the gospel. But I want to be just like me. Well, that's up to God. Maybe they don't want to be just like you. Okay? So, watch this. Let me see where I'm at. Okay. So, number 4, can you remember experiencing any spiritual abuse as a child at the hands of your parents or someone close to you? Anybody? Absolutely. I can remember my parents saying, "Oh, God's going to get you for that." God's going to get you. Or even, saying to your child, if you keep doing that, you're going to be in trouble with God. See, you're using God as a leverage, hoping your child will get better, when actually sitting down on their level and saying, let's talk about this, okay? Because it's not pleasing to me, and I'm pretty sure it's not pleasing to God. But you can't say to them, you're going to hell if you keep doing that. Amen? I mean, how would you feel if I looked at you and said, if you keep that up, you're going to hell? And listen, here's what we do. You about to bust hell wide open. We think we soften it up a little bit. See? We soften it up a little bit. You're going to bust hell wide open. Now, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but how many of you told your child that? If you don't straighten up, you're going to bust hell wide open. Yep. Probably all of us, okay? It probably went something like this. You rebellious little rascal, you're going to bust hell wide open. All that rebellion coming out of you. Yep. All right. Any question on spiritual abuse? No questions. All right. Let's look at emotional abuse. Look at God. Emotional incest, parental inversion, and substitute mate are very abusive role reversals which leave the children confused and frightened. In adulthood, the damage will surface from the inner child. Emotional incest, parental inversion, which inversion is adults placing parental borders or burdens onto their child. In other words, that's trying to manipulate them with words, okay? In other words, you ain't doing nothing but hurting that child's emotions, okay? We do that a lot, okay? Especially when there's been a divorce in the family. How many of you ever looked at them and said something to the child? The mom say something bad about their dad, trying to manipulate the child into thinking one way, okay, or vice versa. And that's abusive, and we have to be careful for the emotional abuse in that, okay? Like, for example, right below it, it says being forced to choose between parents. Parents who force children to choose sides in a fight destroy those children. In divorce situations, quite often the children are told how awful or bad the other parent is. This is very abusive and leaves deep emotional damage in the soul of those little children. Many parents use the children to hurt or control the other spouse, but the children are actually the ones who are destroyed, okay? And it's simply, that's pretty, it's just common knowledge that it's not good to try to manipulate the child into thinking one way by speaking negative of their parent, okay? Because either way, doesn't matter how bad mom is, doesn't matter how bad dad is, they're still that child's parent. They still love that parent. There's nothing you could say to diminish the love for them. So don't do that. Don't go that way, okay? And even if the child comes to you and says ugly things about the other parent, you're the diffuser. You're the one that says, listen, that's your daddy or that's your mama, and you don't need to say those things, okay? You have to be the wiser one, okay? Children don't know any better, okay? And because watch this. Children are very smart, okay? And if they want to get you happy, they'll talk about dad just so you'll be happy, see? And they've learned manipulation early on in life, okay? And I'm going to make mom like me, okay, because I'm going to talk about dad. Then they go over to dad and say, man, I'm going to talk about mom to dad. See, kids learn this, okay? So now watch this. Here's a correlation, all right? If you have multiple children and you're driving down the road and you start talking to this child bad about their sibling, all right? Or vice versa. And then they get in the car with the other one and you talk bad about that one to this one. Your child is learning your behavior, and that's manipulation, and you wonder why your child at that age is able to manipulate. They're just mimicking your behavior, okay? So we have to be careful of what we're doing, okay? Now this one is kind of touchy, and I want to go on to this. It says, sexual abuse oftentimes is not recognized because the victims were not forced into intercourse. Most sexual abuse involves inappropriate touching, fondling, kissing, and or suggestive or lewd speech. Anything that is done to a child or that a child is forced to or encouraged to do that the adult uses for sexual stimulation is considered sexual abuse. Everybody understand? Now, I want to show you an example, okay? There's an old man at church, and he just loves your little baby. And every time your little baby gets around, he says, come here and see me, and he takes your little baby and sets your little baby right in his lap. You need to be mindful, and you need to be careful, because you need to use your discernment. Is this guy just an old gracious grandpa that loves little children, or is he sexually abusing your child with that child in your lap? Now, I know nobody wants to think like this. I know that's off. You don't really want your brain to go there. But the thing about it is, you are the one in charge of that little child. And to be real honest with you, your baby don't need to be sitting in nobody's lap like that. I know you don't, but that's crazy. Now, I ain't talking about their grandpa. I'm talking about people that you don't know, people, strangers, people that because if they have that problem, they prey on other people. They prey on innocent people. Who's more innocent than your little child? See, and you know what? To you, it may not even look like nothing, but to this guy, he's stimulated and he's aroused, and this is a real issue, you see? So be mindful of these kind of things, okay? Sexual abuse doesn't require intercourse. Does everybody understand that? As a counselor, Pastor Teresa and I just look sometimes and shake our head because they say, and they sit in abuse, but they say, oh, we didn't have sex. We didn't have sex. But they had oral intercourse. Well, that's sex. There might not have been penetration, but you had sex. Do you understand that? And people think that oral sex is okay, and in the eyes of God, it's okay. And I got news for you. It's not. All right? If you're not married, if that's not your husband or your wife, keep your lips to yourself. That's all there is to it. Okay? The bottom line is that's not cool. Because you think it's funny, but I got news for you. In high schools today, it's okay. We ain't going to have sex. We're just going to go out to the parking lot in my truck, and it's what we're going to do. And the child thinks it's okay. Maybe they're a virgin. Maybe they don't know nothing about this. But all they hear is their friends talking about it, and it's okay as long as there's no penetration. Well, I got news for you. It's not okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. But brother, if I can, raise your children in the house of the Lord, because a lot of times it's the women initiating it. It's not always the man. Okay? Sometimes that poor fella's the virgin. And this girl's talking about, come on, we go into your truck. Well, what we gonna do? Why we gotta go to my truck? See? I mean, it goes both ways. Okay? And now watch this. They get home. Mama said, you didn't have sex tonight, did you? No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Sure didn't. But mom didn't ask any other questions because they didn't have sex. I'm fine. That's fine. Fine.
Pastor, we see that a lot when I worked with GYN for 20 years.
Sure.
It's the number one
Absolutely.
Transmitted diseases is through oral sex.
That's right. Did you hear what she said? She said that's the number one sexually transmitted disease is through oral sex. Yeah.
And it starts in middle school.
Middle school.
Solidly middle school. 100%.
Yeah. You see why it's important to keep your children close to God? Yeah. I'm telling you, this is real stuff, okay? We don't just make this up. This is very real. And it's more real than you think it is. Okay? But now watch this. Let me just take this one step further, and I promise you I'll move on. Let's just use a female. She's a virgin, okay? She's very naive in life. Maybe she was raised that way. Maybe she's just honest and pure. But she really likes this young man. And they just went to their truck to talk. He just wanted to talk, okay? And it went a little too far. And and one thing led to another. But he convinced her it wasn't sex, okay, because they didn't do anything like that. And when it's all said and done, when that little girl walks away, she's been traumatized. Okay, she's been abused. She's thinking in her mind, what did I just do? Okay, because, okay, we didn't have sex because that's what's taught in that age, but why do I feel so bad? Why do I feel so ugly? Why do I feel so dirty? You see what I mean? And they can't run home and tell mama. They're not going to go home and tell daddy. Daddy will go down there and kill the boy. Okay? So what do? They just suppress it. Now, the next day, you notice there's something wrong. Baby, what's wrong? You quiet today. Oh, nothing, mama. They can't talk to mama about this because they're going to personalize it. I should have never gone to the parking lot. I should have never went to the truck. I should have never got in there with him. I should have never trusted him. See what I mean? But now, all of a sudden, she's not only pulled away from you, you're starting to see emotional and behavioral differences. You see? So that's how this stimulates. That's how this works. And that's how the enemy gets involved. Yes, ma'am?
The answer to that is obviously open communication.
You can't be friend and parent. Okay? You got to be the parent. But you have to raise your child in such a way that they feel comfortable and safe coming to you. If you react in a way that your child don't feel they can come to you, then they're not going to. Because, I mean, now, what are some of the ways? If the child comes to you with non-sexual things and you explode and you go crazy and you lose it and you go into rage over a broken pencil, how in the world, or what? You skipped school today? Oh my God. And you're going berserk and you beat them down to the floor and you do all of this. You threaten them with an inch of their life. But yet this happens and you find out, why didn't you come to mommy? Well, I skipped school and you about killed me. Why in the world would I tell you something like this?
I'll tell you, that happened last school year with Brandon.
Absolutely.
He was 15 at the time, and some little girl did something to him. It wasn't sexually, it was just something. I forget
Right.
what she did. And I said, are you kidding me? And he's like, Mom, come on now, that's why I don't tell you stuff. I said, absolutely not. This little girl has lost her mind. They're real fast, and they're trying to
Sure.
do things way beyond their years. And he said, see, Mama, that's why I don't tell you stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped in my tracks at that moment. I said, oh my God.
That's right.
So we talked about it was fine then, but you just, because I'm the person that would be like, okay, we're going to go to school in the morning, we're going to take care of this.
Right.
Instead of him, like, sleeping on it and thinking about it or getting into
Right.
I did just.
So how you react early on in life could affect your relationship later on. Okay, if you're explosive early on little things, what do you think is going to happen when the real things come along? See, they're just not going to talk to you. Okay, and it becomes, because watch this, they suppress this, so it's messing with so many different areas of that young lady's life, because now it could even go into their relationship and marriage. Because when you're scarred in a sexual way, that harms every area moving forward in your life. Okay, you will not respond appropriately when when you get married. Okay? Yes, ma'am. Hang on one second. Go ahead. Absolutely. Right. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Mm-hmm. 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 That's right. And it's no condemnation here because you didn't know any better. You just thought because that's what your parents did to you and probably their parents to them, you see. So if we don't create a safe environment, you see, and honestly, the biggest where it all starts with ourselves, okay? We have to be real careful because if we treat our child how we were treated, we're going to abuse them. That's all there is to it. Yes. Never too late. Never too late. That's right. I mean, even if you just say, I've been wrong in the past. I've not been a very good parent here. And I want to fix that, okay? And I want to create a safe place and so that you can land softly in with this, okay? Because, listen, and that's why we have counselors at schools. That's why we have school counselors. Do you know how many times the school counselor heard about it before mom and dad did? Because the child felt safe going there, okay? Even not even in sexual matters, just something they did wrong, because it's much better if you go tell my mom than me, okay? Because I'll stand here with you while we deal with mom, because mom can't abuse me while you're sitting here, or dad, you see. Yes, ma'am.
So when she brought up the school situation, it made me think. So Kinsey, she just started kindergarten, and like there was this little boy, he was bullying her.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was a child, I never felt like my mom like advocated for me, like she never protected me. And so come like hell or high water, I'm gonna be my advocate.
Sure, sure.
And so when she told me, I guess that's a good sign that she felt comfortable enough to tell me. I was like, no, like this is not happening. Like I
Mm-hmm.
went to the
Mm-hmm.
school, I told the principal, like I demanded meetings, and all that. But I wonder if that still caused damage in a sense of like embarrassing her, like you said, like that's why I don't tell you stuff. Like
Right.
could it come across in a negative way?
Oh, absolutely.
Trying to like
Absolutely.
be her advocate and like and I told her like mommy will always be there for you, like I'm gonna have your back no
Mm-hmm.
matter what. But then I wonder if like in the adverse, I think I'm doing the right thing by
Mm-hmm.
like taking care of business, like advocating for her.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the opposite end, did it cause damage because it like embarrassed her?
Right. But here's the thing, it's all about communication. Because if you're communicating with that child and you say, now, mommy's going to go to school and we're going to talk about this, and that child doesn't want to be embarrassed, and they say, no, mommy, don't do that. That's embarrassing. You need to listen to that, okay? Because if you go and do it anyway, that child's not coming back to you with anything else. They're going to know because she embarrassed me the last time. So maybe a question to the child. If they respond like that, then how do you think mama should handle this? What do you think we should do that will make you feel better about the situation? And they'll give you good, strong advice. And if you don't agree with it, and that's when communication steps in again. But here's what mommy thinks we should do, you see. Because what's most embarrassing is the surprise element of, Now, if you go down to the school and you're flaring your arms and, God, you're just acting crazy, yes, the child's going to be embarrassed, But if you go down there and conduct business with a normal tone and your child's most likely not going to be humiliated with that, Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to echo something that you said, and you
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it was just really cool because even at 42, I was sitting down with her and she was just like, Carly, we didn't know. And she expressed this like, I feel bad. We didn't know what it was that we were kind of like the first generation where all of us got divorced all over the place in the 70s and the 80s. Like, we were just like,
Oh, yeah, that's what you did.
it finally became this thing that everybody could do. And so it was just really cool. I just wanted to say that, like,
Sure.
even at 42 years old,
Absolutely.
as an adult child, I got this like comfort, and it was almost like this warm hug from her of just like this compassion of just her recognizing
Yes.
that
Yes.
it was rough on us, and
Yes.
like taking a little bit of accountability. So like, I just wanted to say that, like, it's
Yeah.
literally never too late, like never ever.
Absolutely. It's never too late to start anew with your child.
Face your kid.
That's right.
Ooh,
Yeah. And it's okay to say I wasn't a very good parent. I didn't know any better. And yeah, I didn't handle that well. Okay. And it doesn't even have to be anything really major, because you got to remember perspective is real. If that's how you perceive it, see, whether I think that's really how it happened or not, trust me, as a parent, some of my kids tell stories and I'm like, where did you get that from? That's me and Teresa look at each other like, do you remember that happening like that? We both say no. But watch this. If that was their perception, it's real to them. Okay? And because I've looked at my children and said, look, I don't know where you got that, but that ain't the way it happened, okay? And they've argued you tooth and nail. Why? Because that was their perception. And perception is real, okay? But as a parent, you can't say, oh, shut up, that ain't the way it happened. You go sit down, that ain't how it happened, okay? You have to just say, well, I mean, I'm sorry you remember it that way, but me and mom don't, and 2 against 1, okay? me and mom remember it like this, all right? And but which leads us into neglect. Now watch this. As parents,